Have you ever had a day when everything you built suddenly disappeared? In this video, I share the true story of the day I went bankrupt in the United States, the fear, the silence, the moments when I almost gave up, and the unexpected love and simple English learning habits that slowly helped me rise again. Stay with me, because sometimes the worst day of your life quietly becomes the beginning of a better one. The day everything collapsed. Imagine waking up on a quiet morning in the United States, pouring a simple cup of coffee, believing it will be another normal day, and by sunset realizing that the life you carefully built is suddenly gone. That was the day my business collapsed. No dramatic explosion. No loud warning. Just silence, numbers on a screen, and a strange feeling in my chest that something was very wrong. At that time, I was running a small service business. Nothing big. Nothing fancy. In America, small businesses like mine are everywhere. A person with a truck, a few tools, and a dream that hard work will slowly build a better life. My company helped people with small jobs. Cleaning garages. Fixing simple things. Delivering items across town. It was honest work. Some days were busy. Some days were slow. But for a while, it felt like life was moving in the right direction. Each morning I followed a tiny ritual. While drinking coffee, I practiced one simple English sentence out loud. Slowly. Clearly. Like a student. Today will be a good day. Today will be a good day. This habit helped my English improve little by little. Linguists often explain that speaking short sentences slowly helps the brain recognize patterns. When the brain hears familiar sounds again and again, it stops feeling afraid of the language. So every morning I practiced. Today will be a good day. But that particular morning felt different. I opened my laptop to check messages from clients and suppliers. That was part of my routine as a small business owner. In the United States, most small business communication happens through email. 3 messages were waiting. The first email was from a supplier reminding me about a payment. The second email was from a client canceling a project. The third email came from the bank. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Business owners deal with small problems every day. Payments arrive late. Customers change plans. That is part of the game. But something inside me became quiet. Very quiet. I clicked on the message from the bank. The sentence was short and formal. Your account balance has fallen below the required limit. I read it once. Then again. Then one more time. In English, there is a phrase people use in moments like this. It felt like the floor disappeared under my feet. Of course the floor was still there. But my brain felt unstable. Neuroscientists say sudden financial stress activates the same survival systems as physical danger. The body begins to react as if something threatening is happening. My heart beat faster. My hands felt cold. My thoughts became messy and loud. Maybe the bank made a mistake, I thought. So I checked my financial records again. And again. But numbers are stubborn. They rarely lie. Over the past year, several clients had slowly disappeared. Some moved away. Some closed their businesses. At the same time, costs kept rising. Fuel prices increased. Equipment repairs became expensive. Small problems had quietly stacked together. In America, cash flow is the oxygen of a small business. When that oxygen disappears, things collapse faster than people expect. One missed payment becomes 2. 2 become 10. Suddenly you are not balancing numbers anymore. You are drowning in them. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. The coffee beside me was already cold. Outside my window, the neighborhood looked peaceful. Cars passed by. A neighbor walked his dog. Someone was mowing the lawn across the street. Life continued normally for everyone else. That is the strange thing about personal disasters. The world does not stop. But inside your mind, everything freezes. A heavy thought slowly appeared in my head. Maybe it's over. Many people who try to learn English know this feeling. You sit with a book. You listen to a conversation. The words move too fast. Your brain becomes tired. Then a quiet voice appears. Maybe I should quit. Psychologists explain this very simply. The brain loves comfort. When something feels difficult or uncertain, the brain tries to protect energy by suggesting that you stop. That morning, the same voice whispered inside me. Stop trying. Stop fighting. Just give up. But instead of closing my laptop, I reached for a small notebook that I used for English practice. It was nothing special. A cheap notebook from a dollar store. Inside were dozens of short sentences I had practiced reading and speaking slowly. On a new page, I wrote a simple line. My business is in trouble. Then I read it out loud. My business is in trouble. My voice sounded quiet. Almost fragile. But something interesting happened. When we say our fears out loud, the brain begins to organize them. Researchers in cognitive psychology explain that labeling emotions reduces panic in the brain. Language gives structure to chaos. So I wrote another sentence. I feel scared today. Again, slowly. I feel scared today. Then another. But I am still here. But I am still here. The sentences were simple. Almost like something a child would write. But they changed something inside my mind. Because bankruptcy is not only about money. It is about identity. In the United States, people often describe themselves through their work. I run a company. I own a business. I manage employees. When that disappears, a strange emptiness appears in your life. You start asking questions that feel uncomfortable. Who am I now? What happens next? That morning, sitting alone with unpaid bills and cold coffee, I believed my story was ending. But something unexpected was quietly beginning. A new habit. A new path. And eventually, a love story I never imagined. At that moment, I was simply a tired man in a small American apartment, reading very simple English sentences while his business collapsed. Sometimes life does not break loudly. Sometimes it breaks in silence. And sometimes, that silence becomes the place where a new life begins. Silence after the fall. Silence feels different after a failure. Not the peaceful silence you feel on a quiet Sunday morning. Not the comfortable silence of a calm evening at home. This silence is heavier. It sits in the room with you like an invisible guest that refuses to leave. The days after my business collapsed felt exactly like that. I woke up the next morning at the same time as usual. My body still followed the old routine. When you repeat habits long enough, your brain keeps doing them even when life has changed. Scientists call this habit memory. The brain stores routines in deep neural circuits. That is why people can brush their teeth or drive a familiar road almost automatically. My body woke up early. My hand reached for coffee. My mind expected another busy workday. But the reality was different. There were no clients to call. No deliveries to schedule. No team members asking questions. Just silence. In the United States, work is a big part of identity. Many people structure their entire day around their job. When that structure disappears suddenly, the brain feels lost. Psychologists often compare it to removing the frame from a painting. The picture still exists, but it feels unstable. That was exactly how my mind felt. Unstable. Uncertain. Quiet. I sat at the kitchen table again, looking at my small English notebook. For a moment, I did not want to open it. When people feel embarrassed or defeated, the brain often avoids reminders of progress. A strange psychological effect happens. The mind begins protecting itself by avoiding effort. That morning, my brain whispered a familiar sentence again. Why practice English now? Your business is gone. The logic sounded reasonable. But another voice inside me answered. Maybe this is exactly why I should continue. So I opened the notebook. On a new page, I wrote a short sentence. Today feels very quiet. Then I read it slowly. Today feels very quiet. When learning English, speaking slowly helps the brain process sound patterns. Linguists explain that the brain learns rhythm before it learns complexity. When sentences are short and calm, the brain relaxes and absorbs language more naturally. So I repeated the sentence again. Today feels very quiet. Outside my apartment window, the American neighborhood looked exactly the same as always. A school bus passed by. Someone walked a dog across the street. A delivery truck stopped at the neighbor's house. The world looked normal. But inside my chest, a heavy weight remained. Money problems bring a very specific kind of fear. Researchers studying financial stress found that uncertainty about money activates the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for fear responses. That is why people with financial problems often experience restless sleep, constant worry, endless thinking. Your brain tries to solve the problem again and again, even when there is no immediate solution. That week, my mind replayed the same thoughts every night. How did this happen? What will I do now? What will people think? Another uncomfortable truth about failure appeared during those days. Shame. In American culture, success is celebrated loudly. People love stories about entrepreneurs who build companies and achieve big dreams. But when someone fails, the story becomes quiet. Very quiet. I did not tell many people about the bankruptcy at first. Not my neighbors. Not old clients. Not even some friends. Silence felt safer. One evening, I walked through a small park near my apartment. The air was cool. The sky slowly turned orange as the sun disappeared behind the buildings. Families were sitting on benches. Children were playing. A young couple was laughing near the fountain. Watching them made me feel strange. Life continued for everyone else. And I felt like I was standing outside the normal world. While sitting on a bench, I opened my notebook again. This time, I wrote a question. What should I do next? Then I read it slowly. What should I do next? The sentence felt powerful. Because language does something interesting to the brain. When we turn worries into questions, the brain switches into problem-solving mode instead of panic mode. So I added another line. I will start small. I will start small. Small steps are powerful. Behavioral psychologists explain that when people face large, overwhelming problems, the brain becomes paralyzed. But when the task becomes small and simple, motivation slowly returns. So that night, my goal was not to rebuild a company. My goal was much smaller. Practice English. Clear my mind. Stay calm. The next morning, I added another sentence to the notebook. Failure is not the end. Failure is not the end. At that moment, I did not fully believe the sentence. But repeating it felt important. Something interesting happens when we repeat hopeful language. Neuroscience research shows that positive statements can gradually reshape the brain's emotional responses. The brain begins forming new connections between language and belief. That process takes time. Days. Weeks. Sometimes months. But small sentences can slowly change the direction of a life. During that quiet week, I had no idea that something unexpected was about to happen. A random afternoon. A quiet public library. And a simple conversation in slow English that would change everything. Because sometimes life does not send solutions through big dramatic events. Sometimes it sends them through small, ordinary moments. A stranger. A smile. A conversation. And that conversation was waiting for me in a place I had visited many times before. The library. A simple English habit. Strange things happen when life suddenly becomes quiet. At first, silence feels heavy. It sits on your shoulders like a weight. But after a few days, the silence begins to change. Your brain slowly adapts. The noise of daily stress fades away, and small thoughts become clearer. That was exactly what happened during the week after my business collapsed. My schedule had disappeared. No meetings. No urgent calls. No deliveries to arrange. For the first time in a long time, my days were almost empty. And that emptiness forced me to face something important. My mind. Many psychologists explain that when people are constantly busy, the brain stays in reactive mode. It jumps from problem to problem without reflection. But when life slows down, the brain enters what researchers call the default mode network. This is the mental state where reflection, creativity, and long-term thinking happen. In simple words, silence allows the brain to breathe. So instead of fighting the quiet days, I decided to build a small routine. Nothing big. Just one simple habit. Every morning, I would practice English slowly using short sentences from my notebook. That was it. No complicated grammar books. No difficult vocabulary lists. Just reading and speaking simple sentences out loud. The first morning I tried this new routine, the air outside felt cool and calm. Sunlight came through the kitchen window and landed on the table where my notebook rested. I opened it and wrote a short sentence. Today I will keep going. Then I spoke it slowly. Today. I will keep going. Speaking slowly might feel strange at first, but language experts explain that slow pronunciation strengthens listening ability. When learners stretch the rhythm of a sentence, the brain begins to notice individual sounds more clearly. This process improves both listening and speaking at the same time. So I repeated the sentence again. Today I will keep going. Something inside my chest felt slightly lighter. Not happy, but calmer. After finishing my coffee, I walked to a nearby public library. Libraries in the United States are amazing places. Quiet rooms, comfortable chairs, and shelves filled with books from every part of the world. But the most important thing for me was this. Libraries are peaceful. And peace was exactly what my mind needed. I sat near a large window with my notebook. Outside, autumn leaves moved slowly in the wind. A few students were studying nearby. Someone turned the pages of a book quietly. No pressure. No noise. Just a calm space to think and learn. That day I wrote another sentence. I can start again. I can start again. Many people underestimate the power of small positive language. Neuroscientists studying neuroplasticity explain that the brain is constantly rewiring itself based on repeated thoughts and words. If someone repeats negative thoughts every day, the brain becomes trained to expect failure. But when someone repeats hopeful sentences, even simple ones, the brain begins forming new emotional pathways. It does not happen overnight. But repetition slowly changes belief. So I practiced again. I can start again. Then I added another line. Small steps are enough today. Small steps are enough today. Reading these sentences slowly created a rhythm in my mind. Almost like meditation. My breathing slowed down. My shoulders relaxed. Something interesting was happening. The same brain that had felt overwhelmed by financial stress a week earlier was beginning to calm down. Psychologists often describe this as cognitive grounding. When people focus on simple, structured activities, like reading slowly, the brain shifts attention away from chaotic thoughts. In other words, language practice became a form of emotional recovery. A small therapy session with a notebook. Around noon, I decided to take a break and walk between the tall shelves of books. Libraries always feel magical in a quiet way. Thousands of stories resting silently, waiting for someone curious enough to open them. I stopped in the section for simple English readers. Short stories. Clear vocabulary. Perfect for language learners. I picked up a thin book and sat back down at my table. The first sentence in the story was very simple. The man walked slowly down the road. I read it quietly. Then again. Then out loud. The man walked slowly down the road. Slow reading helps the brain connect written language with spoken sound. Linguists call this phonological mapping, where the brain links letters to pronunciation patterns. The more times the brain experiences this connection, the easier it becomes to understand spoken English later. So I kept reading. Page after page. Sentence after sentence. The afternoon passed quietly. And something surprising happened. For the first time since the bankruptcy, my mind stopped thinking about money for a while. It focused on the story instead. Words. Sounds. Rhythm. Sometimes the best medicine for a tired mind is not solving a problem immediately. Sometimes it is simply giving the brain something gentle and structured to hold on to. As the library lights slowly turned warmer in the evening, I closed the book and wrote one final sentence in my notebook. Something good will happen. Something good will happen. At that moment, I did not know how true that sentence would become. Because the next afternoon, in that same quiet library, while practicing another simple English sentence, something unexpected happened. Someone sat down at the table across from me. A stranger. A smile. And a conversation that would quietly change the direction of my life. Meeting her at the library. Some meetings in life arrive quietly. No dramatic music. No bright spotlight. Just an ordinary moment that feels small at first, until you realize later that it changed everything. That afternoon at the library felt like one of those moments. The air inside the building was calm and warm. Sunlight passed through the tall windows and created long golden lines across the wooden tables. A few students were studying. Someone typed softly on a laptop. Pages of books turned slowly in different corners of the room. I was sitting at my usual table with my notebook. By then, my daily routine had become very simple. Wake up. Drink coffee. Practice slow English sentences. Spend a few hours at the library. Simple habits can stabilize the brain during difficult times. Behavioral scientists often say that predictable routines reduce anxiety because the brain begins to feel safe again. So that day I opened my notebook and wrote another sentence. Today I feel a little stronger. Then I read it slowly. Today I feel a little stronger. My pronunciation was still careful and slow, like a beginner. But that was intentional. Language teachers often explain that slow speaking improves both clarity and confidence. I repeated the sentence again. Today I feel a little stronger. Just as I finished the sentence, I noticed someone sitting across the table. A woman. She had placed a small stack of books beside her laptop. A cup of tea rested near her hand. She looked focused, reading something carefully on the screen. At first, I returned to my notebook. Libraries are quiet places, and people usually respect personal space. But after a few minutes, something unexpected happened. She smiled. Not a big dramatic smile. Just a small, friendly one. In American culture, small smiles between strangers are common. They are simple signals that say, I see you. I respect your space. Then she spoke. Are you practicing English? Her voice was calm and curious. For a second, my brain froze. When you practice English alone for many days, speaking with a real person suddenly feels different. Your brain shifts from practice mode to communication mode. This moment activates what linguists call real-time language processing. The brain must understand meaning, choose vocabulary, and produce sound quickly. That can feel intimidating. But I answered slowly. Yes. I am practicing. She nodded. I noticed you read very carefully. That's a good way to learn. Her English was clear and natural. Not too fast. Not too slow. Then she pointed gently at my notebook. What sentence are you practicing today? I hesitated for a moment, then turned the notebook toward her. She read the sentence quietly. Today I feel a little stronger. She smiled again. That's a good sentence. Something about the way she said it felt encouraging. Many psychologists explain that positive social feedback strengthens learning motivation. When another person acknowledges effort, the brain releases small amounts of dopamine, the chemical connected to motivation and reward. In simple terms, encouragement makes the brain want to continue. So I asked a small question. Do you come here often? She laughed softly. Yes. I'm here almost every afternoon. Then she introduced herself. My name is Emily. I introduced myself too. Our conversation remained simple. Short sentences. Clear words. Exactly the kind of English practice I needed. She told me she worked nearby at a community center that helped immigrants adjust to life in the United States. Many people came to her center to learn English, find jobs, and understand American culture. That's why I recognized your practice, she said. I see many language learners every week. I felt slightly embarrassed. My English is still slow. She shook her head gently. Slow is good. Slow means careful. That sentence stayed in my mind. Slow means careful. Language experts often confirm this idea. When learners speak slowly, the brain processes pronunciation more accurately. Over time, speed naturally increases. So speaking slowly is not weakness. It is training. Emily looked at the book I was reading. Simple stories are perfect for learning, she said. Then she asked something unexpected. Do you want to practice conversation sometimes? For a moment I did not know how to answer. Real conversations felt more difficult than reading alone. But another thought appeared. This could help. Yes, I said. I would like that. She nodded. We can start with very simple topics. Then she pointed at my notebook again. Tell me something about today. So I looked at the sentence I had written earlier. Today I feel a little stronger. She listened carefully. Why stronger? That question surprised me. For a moment I searched for words. My business closed last week, I said slowly. Her expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that. Then she said something interesting. You know, many people start new chapters after losing something. Her voice carried quiet confidence. Sometimes encouragement from a stranger feels powerful because it carries no judgment. They simply see the moment, not your past mistakes. We talked for almost 30 minutes that afternoon. About books. About learning English. About life in the United States. And for the first time in many days, I noticed something strange. I laughed. Not a big laugh, but a real one. When I left the library that evening, the air outside felt different. The sky was deep blue, and the city lights were beginning to appear. Walking home, I repeated a new sentence in my mind. Maybe something good is beginning. Maybe something good is beginning. I did not realize it yet. But that simple conversation in the quiet library would slowly grow into something much bigger. Friendship. Trust. And eventually, a love story that neither of us expected. But at that moment, it was simply two people sitting across a wooden table, practicing slow English sentences. And sometimes, that is exactly how life begins to change. Coffee, culture, and conversation. Friendship rarely announces itself loudly. It usually begins with something simple, like a conversation that lasts a little longer than expected, or a question that leads to another question, and suddenly time moves faster than usual. That was exactly how things began with Emily. A few days after our first conversation in the library, we met again at the same table. By then, my routine had become almost predictable. I would arrive around noon, open my notebook, and practice slow English sentences while the quiet sounds of the library surrounded me. That afternoon, Emily walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. She placed one on the table in front of me. "I thought you might like this," she said. For a moment, I was surprised. "Thank you," I replied slowly. Coffee culture in the United States is interesting. Coffee is not only a drink, it is also a social bridge. Many conversations, friendships, and even business deals begin over a simple cup of coffee. Researchers studying social psychology often point out that shared rituals, like drinking coffee together, create a sense of trust and comfort between people. The brain begins associating the presence of another person with calm and warmth. That small cup of coffee changed the atmosphere of the afternoon. Instead of simply practicing English alone, we started talking more naturally. Emily asked a simple question. "What do you usually do when you are not practicing English?" For a second, I laughed quietly. "Right now, practicing English is most of my day." She smiled. "That's fair." Then she asked another question. "What did you do before your business closed?" So I explained slowly. I told her about my small service company. The deliveries. The repair jobs. The clients who slowly disappeared. Speaking about it out loud felt strange but also helpful. Psychologists often explain that storytelling helps the brain process emotional experiences. When people describe events using language, the mind begins organizing memories in a healthier way. Emily listened carefully. "That sounds like hard work," she said. "It was," I replied. "But sometimes hard work still fails." She nodded thoughtfully. "Yes. That happens more often than people admit." Her honesty surprised me. Many cultures celebrate success but hide failure. Yet Emily spoke about failure as something normal, something human. After a moment she said something that made me curious. "My father lost his business once." I looked up. "Really?" She nodded. "When I was 12. Then she added quietly, "Our family had to move to a smaller house." Stories have a powerful effect on conversation. When someone shares something personal, the distance between 2 people becomes smaller. The conversation began to flow more naturally. We talked about culture. About life in the United States. About how different things can feel for someone learning English and adapting to a new environment. Emily explained something interesting about American communication style. In the U.S., people often value direct communication, she said. Clear sentences. Clear opinions. Then she pointed to my notebook. "That's why your practice is good. Simple sentences help you express ideas clearly." I looked at the sentence I had written that day. "Today I feel hopeful." I read it slowly. Today. I feel hopeful. Emily nodded approvingly. That's a great word. Hopeful. Hope is a powerful psychological concept. Research in positive psychology shows that hope increases resilience, the ability to recover from setbacks. In simple terms, When people believe the future can improve, their brain becomes more motivated to act. Emily then suggested a small exercise. Let's practice conversation using your sentences. So she asked me questions based on the words in my notebook. Why do you feel hopeful today? I thought carefully before answering. Because I am learning again. She smiled. That's a good reason. Our conversation moved slowly, but it felt comfortable. Each sentence gave my brain a little more confidence. Language learning experts often say that real conversations activate multiple parts of the brain: listening, memory, pronunciation, and emotional response. This kind of learning is much more powerful than memorizing vocabulary alone. After about an hour, Emily suggested something new. Do you want to get real coffee next time? She asked. I looked at the paper cup in my hand. This is real coffee. She laughed. No, I mean coffee outside the library. The idea made me slightly nervous. Practicing English in a quiet library felt safe. But speaking English in a busy cafe sounded more challenging. Emily noticed my hesitation. It's okay, she said. We can go somewhere quiet. A small part of my brain whispered the same old fear. Your English isn't good enough. But another voice answered. This is how you improve. So I nodded. Okay. A few days later we met at a small cafe near the library. American cafes are interesting places. People work on laptops, meet friends, study, or simply sit quietly with a drink. The environment felt relaxed but alive. Emily ordered coffee for both of us. Then she said something unexpected. Let's practice one new sentence today. I opened my notebook. What sentence? She thought for a moment. Then she said slowly. Life sometimes starts again. I wrote it down. Life sometimes starts again. Then I read it aloud. Life sometimes starts again. The sentence stayed in my mind long after the conversation ended. Because something about it felt true. A few weeks earlier, I believed my story was ending with bankruptcy. But sitting in that cafe, practicing English with someone who genuinely wanted to help, I began to see another possibility. Maybe that terrible day was not the end of the story. Maybe it was just the beginning of a different chapter. A chapter filled with new conversations, new confidence, and a connection that was slowly becoming more meaningful than either of us expected. When love meets hard reality. Something interesting happens when two people talk often. At first, the conversations are simple. Safe topics. Books, coffee, weather, daily routines. But as time passes, the topics slowly become deeper. Personal stories appear. Quiet truths begin to surface. That was exactly what started happening between Emily and me. Our coffee meetings became a small tradition. Every few days we met at the same cafe near the library. The place smelled like roasted coffee beans and warm bread. People typed on laptops, soft music played in the background, and sunlight often filled the large windows. At first, our conversations focused on English practice. Emily would ask simple questions, and I would answer slowly. Sometimes she corrected my pronunciation gently. Sometimes she explained a new phrase. For example, one afternoon she taught me an expression many Americans use. Take it one step at a time. She wrote the sentence in my notebook. Take it one step at a time. I repeated it carefully. Language teachers love phrases like this because they carry both vocabulary and cultural meaning. Americans often use this expression when facing difficult situations. It means not trying to solve everything at once. Just move forward slowly. One step. Then another. That sentence became very important to me. Because outside the cafe, reality was still difficult. My financial situation had not magically improved. Bills were still waiting. My savings were shrinking faster than I wanted to admit. Every night I opened my laptop to search for jobs. Delivery driver. Warehouse helper. Cleaning assistant. In the United States, many people rebuild their lives through small jobs like these. Work may not be glamorous, but it provides stability. But job searching can be emotionally exhausting. Each application asks questions. Each interview carries uncertainty. Psychologists studying unemployment often describe the emotional cycle people experience: hope, rejection, self-doubt, and renewed effort. Your mind moves through these stages again and again. One afternoon at the cafe, Emily noticed something different about my mood. "You look tired today," she said gently. I smiled weakly. "Job searching." She nodded slowly. "That can be stressful." For a moment I hesitated. Then I decided to be honest. "My savings are almost gone," I admitted. Saying the words out loud made the situation feel more real. Emily didn't immediately respond. She simply listened. That was something I appreciated about her. She did not rush to give advice. She allowed space for silence. After a moment she said something thoughtful. "Money problems can make people feel alone." That sentence felt very accurate. Financial stress often isolates people. When someone loses stability, they sometimes withdraw from friends or social life because of embarrassment. Researchers call this social withdrawal during financial stress. The brain tries to avoid situations that remind it of failure. Emily looked at my notebook again. "What sentence did you practice today?" I turned the page toward her. The sentence read, "I will keep trying." She smiled slightly. "That's a good one." Then she asked a question that surprised me. "What are you afraid of right now?" The question was simple, but answering it required honesty. "I'm afraid of starting over," I said slowly. Emily nodded. "That's a common fear." Then she told me something personal. When my dad lost his business, he was afraid too. I looked at her curiously. "What happened?" She leaned back slightly in her chair, remembering. For a while he felt embarrassed. He avoided talking to friends. He stayed home a lot. Her voice was calm but reflective. But eventually he realized something important. "What?" I asked. He realized that failure did not erase his abilities. That idea stayed with me. Failure does not erase ability. Psychologists often emphasize this distinction. When people fail, they sometimes confuse an event with their identity. But a failed business does not mean someone lacks intelligence, discipline, or creativity. It simply means a plan did not work. Emily then said something unexpected. You know, you're rebuilding more than money. I looked confused. What do you mean? You're rebuilding confidence, she explained. And language. And habits. Her observation surprised me because it was true. The daily English practice. The routine of visiting the library. The conversations at the cafe. All these small actions were slowly rebuilding something inside me. Confidence. But reality still created tension. One evening while walking home after coffee, I realized something uncomfortable. I had begun to enjoy Emily's company more than I expected. Our conversations felt natural. Our laughter felt easy. And when she was not there, the library felt strangely empty. But another thought appeared immediately. You are broke. Your life is unstable. What kind of future could you offer someone? Love and financial stress often collide in complicated ways. Studies show that economic insecurity can create strong emotional barriers in relationships. People begin asking practical questions. Is this responsible? Is this fair? Is this realistic? One afternoon, while sitting at the cafe again, Emily asked casually, "What are your plans for the next few months?" The question made me pause. Plans felt uncertain. I'm still figuring that out, I said honestly. She nodded. Life rarely moves in straight lines. Then she smiled and added something playful. But sometimes the detours are more interesting. Her sentence sounded light, but it carried deeper meaning. Because both of us were standing at uncertain points in life. My financial future was unclear. And neither of us knew yet that our growing friendship was slowly becoming something more complicated. Something warmer. Something riskier. Something that would soon test both our courage and our patience. Because sometimes love does not arrive when life is perfect. Sometimes it appears exactly when life is most uncertain. Learning to speak again. Confidence rarely returns all at once. It usually comes back slowly, like the sunrise on a cloudy morning. First a little light appears, then a little more, and eventually you realize the darkness has quietly disappeared. That slow return of confidence was happening inside me, though I did not fully notice it at first. My English practice continued every day. The notebook had become an important companion in my routine. Each morning I wrote a few simple sentences. Each afternoon I practiced reading them slowly, sometimes alone, sometimes with Emily at the cafe or the library. Language learning is fascinating because it reflects emotional growth. Researchers studying second language acquisition often explain that confidence and language ability grow together. When people feel safe speaking, their brain becomes more willing to experiment with words. And Emily created that sense of safety. One afternoon in the cafe, she brought a new idea for practice. Today we will try something different, she said. I looked curious. What kind of practice? She pointed at my notebook. Instead of only reading sentences, tell me a small story. That suggestion made me nervous. Single sentences felt manageable. Stories felt bigger. More complicated. But Emily smiled reassuringly. Just a simple story, she said. Short sentences. Take your time. So I looked down at the notebook and thought carefully. Then I began slowly. Last year, I started a small business. My voice sounded hesitant at first, but I continued. I worked very hard, but many problems happened. Emily listened without interrupting. That was something she did very well. She gave conversations space to breathe. Listening is an important part of language learning. Studies show that when learners feel truly heard, their brain becomes more relaxed, which improves both pronunciation and vocabulary recall. So I continued my small story. My business closed, and I felt lost. Emily nodded gently. But you didn't stop, she said. I looked at her. No, I replied slowly. I started learning again. She smiled. That's the important part. Then she said something interesting. You're not only learning English. I raised an eyebrow. What else am I learning? You're learning how to speak honestly. That sentence stayed in my mind. Language is not only about grammar or vocabulary. It is also about expressing truth. When people speak honestly, even with simple words, the conversation becomes meaningful. That afternoon we practiced more storytelling. Emily asked small questions to guide the conversation. What did you feel when the business closed? What helped you continue? What do you hope for now? Each question pushed me to speak a little more. My sentences were still simple, but they were becoming smoother. Psychologists often describe this stage as building communication confidence. The brain slowly learns that mistakes are not dangerous. When fear disappears, language flows more naturally. At one point I laughed and said, "My English is still slow." Emily responded with a playful expression. "Yes," she said. "But your ideas are fast." That made both of us laugh. Humor is surprisingly powerful in learning environments. Research shows that laughter reduces stress hormones and increases memory retention. In simple words, people remember things better when they feel relaxed. Our practice sessions began to feel less like studying and more like conversations between friends. But something else was changing too. Our connection. One evening after the cafe closed, we walked together along a quiet street. The city lights reflected softly on the pavement, and the air carried the cool smell of autumn. We talked about culture again. Emily asked a thoughtful question. What surprised you most about life in the United States? I thought for a moment. Second chances, I said slowly. She looked curious. What do you mean? In some places, I explained, failure follows you forever. But here, people start again. Emily nodded. That's true. She then shared something personal. My father started 3 different businesses after losing the first one. 3? I asked. Yes, she said with a smile. The third one worked. Stories like that carry quiet inspiration. They remind us that success often comes after multiple attempts. But the conversation soon moved into more personal territory. Emily looked at me thoughtfully. Can I ask you something honest? Of course, I said. Do you still feel afraid? The question made me pause. Fear had been a constant companion during the weeks after bankruptcy. But something inside me had changed. A little, I admitted. But not the same kind of fear. What kind now? She asked. I smiled slightly. Now I'm afraid of staying stuck. Emily laughed softly. That's a good fear. Why? I asked. Because it pushes you forward. Her answer made sense. Psychologists explain that not all fear is harmful. Some forms of fear, like the fear of wasting potential, can motivate growth and action. That night when I returned home, I opened my notebook again. I wrote a new sentence. I am learning to speak again. Then I read it slowly. I am learning to speak again. But the sentence had two meanings. One meaning was obvious. I was learning to speak English more confidently. But the deeper meaning was about life. After failure, after silence, after uncertainty, I was learning to speak again. To share ideas. To express hope. To imagine a future. And slowly, without either of us saying it directly, something else was growing between Emily and me. Something warmer than friendship. Something neither of us had planned. Something that would soon face its own challenges. Because love, like language, requires courage. And the next chapter of our story would test exactly how much courage we both had. A small new beginning. New beginnings rarely look impressive. In movies, a new chapter often starts with dramatic music, big opportunities, or a sudden breakthrough. But real life is quieter. Most new beginnings look small. Almost invisible. Mine began with a very ordinary job. One morning, after weeks of searching, I received a call from a small local logistics company. They needed someone to help with deliveries a few days a week. The job was simple: move packages, organize boxes, drive short routes around the city. It was not the kind of work that people brag about. But at that moment, it meant stability. And stability is powerful. Psychologists studying recovery after financial loss often emphasize the importance of regaining routine. When people return to regular work, even simple work, the brain begins rebuilding a sense of control. Control reduces stress. And reduced stress improves decision-making. So I accepted the job immediately. The first day felt strange. For months I had been running my own small business. I made decisions. I scheduled jobs. I managed clients. Now I was starting again at the bottom of a small team. But something interesting happened during that first week. I did not feel embarrassed. Instead, I felt relieved. Because responsibility had become simpler. My job was clear. Show up. Work honestly. Deliver the packages. Go home. Sometimes the simplest structure is exactly what the brain needs after chaos. In the evenings, my English routine continued. After work, I still visited the library or the small cafe where Emily and I usually met. My notebook now contained many sentences, each one marking a small step in my recovery. One evening I wrote, "Today I worked again. Today. I worked again." Then another sentence. Small work can build a big future. Small work can build a big future. Language learning experts often say that repetition with meaningful sentences improves both memory and emotional connection to the language. When words describe your real life, the brain stores them more deeply. And those sentences described my life perfectly. Emily noticed the change almost immediately. When we met at the cafe one afternoon, she studied my face for a moment. "You look different today," she said. "Different how?" I asked. She smiled. Lighter. I laughed. I started a new job. Her eyes brightened. That's great. Then she asked what I was doing. I explained the delivery work and the warehouse tasks. Emily nodded thoughtfully. Every big story has a rebuilding chapter, she said. Her words sounded almost like something from a book. But they were true. Human lives rarely move in straight lines. Psychologists often describe progress as nonlinear growth. People move forward, then backward, then forward again. What matters is continuing movement. During the next few weeks, something else began to change. My English improved faster. At work, I had to communicate with coworkers. Simple conversations happened every day. Where should this package go? Can you help me load this truck? Is the delivery finished? These sentences were short, but they forced my brain to think quickly in English. This is called situational language learning, when the brain learns language through real-world tasks instead of textbooks. And it works surprisingly well. Soon my coworkers began chatting with me more comfortably. One afternoon, a colleague named Mike asked, "So what did you do before this job?" I hesitated briefly, then answered honestly. I ran a small business before, but it closed. Mike nodded casually. That happens. Then he added something unexpected. My brother failed at 2 businesses before starting the one he has now. His tone was relaxed, almost normal. That moment taught me something important about American culture. Failure is often seen as experience rather than permanent defeat. Of course, not everyone thinks this way. But many people understand that trying something difficult always carries risk. That perspective helped me feel less ashamed about my past. Meanwhile, Emily and I continued meeting regularly. Our conversations now flowed more naturally. My sentences were longer. My vocabulary was growing. One evening we walked through a small park after leaving the cafe. The air smelled like autumn leaves, and the streetlights cast soft yellow circles on the path. Emily looked at me thoughtfully. You've changed a lot in the past month. I smiled. In what way? You sound more confident, she said. And not just in English. Confidence is an interesting psychological state. It rarely appears suddenly. Instead, it grows quietly through repeated small successes. A completed task. A solved problem. A meaningful conversation. Each success strengthens the brain's belief that progress is possible. As we walked, Emily asked another question. Do you ever think about starting a business again? The question surprised me. Only a few weeks earlier, that idea would have terrified me. But now, the thought felt different. Maybe someday, I said slowly. Not yet. She nodded approvingly. That sounds wise. Timing matters in recovery. Experts in behavioral psychology often explain that people should rebuild stability before attempting large risks again. For now, I was rebuilding the basics. Work. Confidence. Language. Friendship. And something else that neither of us had clearly named yet. Because as our conversations grew deeper, our connection grew stronger. But life rarely allows happiness to grow without testing it. Soon, a difficult decision would appear in front of both of us. A decision that would challenge our growing relationship. And once again, I would need to ask myself a simple question. Am I brave enough to start another chapter? Family, trust, and second chances. Life has a quiet way of testing progress. Just when things begin to feel stable, a new question appears. Not a crisis like before, not a sudden collapse, but something deeper. A question that asks whether you truly believe in the new path you're building. For me, that question arrived through something very simple. A dinner invitation. One evening at the cafe, Emily stirred her coffee slowly and said, almost casually, "My parents are visiting this weekend." I nodded politely. That sounds nice. Then she added another sentence. They'd like to meet you. For a moment my brain froze. Meeting someone's parents is rarely a small event, especially when your life still feels like it is under construction. I was still working a modest delivery job. My finances were fragile. My future plans were not yet clear. And suddenly, the possibility of being introduced to her family appeared. Psychologists often explain that moments like this activate what is called social evaluation anxiety. The brain becomes concerned about how others will judge us, our success, our stability, our worth. That night I walked home slowly, repeating a sentence in my mind. Am I ready for this? Am I ready for this? My English notebook had become my place for thinking, so when I arrived home I opened it again. I wrote a new sentence. I am rebuilding my life. I read it slowly. I am rebuilding my life. The sentence felt honest. Not finished, but honest. The next evening Emily and I met again, and she noticed that I seemed quieter than usual. You're thinking about the dinner, she said with a small smile. I laughed nervously. Yes. She leaned back in her chair. My parents are not scary, she said. That's easy for you to say, I replied. She laughed. That's fair. Then she added something thoughtful. My father understands failure. Those words caught my attention immediately. Because of his business? I asked. She nodded. Yes. Emily had told me before that her father lost a company when she was young. But now she explained the story more deeply. At first he felt ashamed, she said. He thought people would see him as weak. I understood that feeling very well. But something interesting happened, she continued. What? I asked. His friends didn't disappear. They helped him. Social support is one of the strongest predictors of recovery after failure. Studies in behavioral psychology show that people with supportive relationships recover from setbacks faster and maintain stronger mental health. Emily's father had experienced that support. Eventually, he started another business. Then another. And the third one finally succeeded. Listening to her story made the dinner invitation feel slightly less intimidating. Still, the night of the dinner arrived quickly. Their house was located in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes from the city center. When Emily and I walked up the front steps, warm light shone through the windows. Inside, the smell of homemade food filled the air. Emily's mother greeted us first. She was warm and welcoming, with a gentle smile that immediately made the room feel comfortable. Her father shook my hand firmly. Nice to meet you, he said. His voice carried calm confidence. Dinner conversations can sometimes feel like interviews. Questions appear from every direction. Where are you from? What do you do? What are your plans? But something surprising happened during that evening. The conversation felt natural. Emily's father asked about my work, and I answered honestly. I'm doing delivery work right now, I explained. After my business closed. Instead of awkward silence, he nodded thoughtfully. That takes courage, he said. His response surprised me. Courage? Failure had never felt courageous before. But he continued. Starting something new after a loss is never easy. He spoke from experience, and I could hear that experience in his voice. During the dinner, he told a story from his own past. When his first company collapsed, he spent nearly a year working simple jobs while planning his next step. He drove trucks. He helped in warehouses. He did whatever work was necessary to stabilize his family's life. His message was simple. Work is never something to be ashamed of. That sentence stayed in my mind long after the dinner ended. Because sometimes people confuse status with dignity. But dignity comes from effort, honesty, and responsibility, not from job titles. Later that evening, as Emily and I walked outside, the night air felt cool and peaceful. She looked at me curiously. So, she asked, how do you feel now? I laughed softly. Relieved. She smiled. My parents liked you. That sentence made my heart beat a little faster. But the most important moment of the evening had happened earlier, just before dessert. Emily's father had looked at me and said something simple but powerful. Everyone deserves a second chance. Psychologists often describe second chances as critical moments in personal development. When people believe they are allowed to try again, their motivation and creativity increase dramatically. Second chances create hope. Hope creates action. And action creates change. That night when I returned home, I opened my notebook once again. I wrote a new sentence. People can rebuild. Then I read it slowly. People can rebuild. The sentence felt stronger than many others I had written before. Because now it was no longer just an idea. It was a belief. And that belief was about to guide the next stage of my journey. A stage where small steps would slowly lead towards something bigger than I had imagined when my business first collapsed. The slow rise. Growth rarely feels dramatic while it is happening. Most of the time, progress is quiet. So quiet that you almost miss it. A small improvement here. A new opportunity there. A conversation that feels easier than it did last month. But if you step back and look carefully, the pattern becomes clear. You are rising. Slowly, patiently, but rising. That was the stage my life had entered. Several months had passed since the day my business collapsed. My new delivery job had become stable. I understood the routines, the routes, and the people I worked with. My coworkers trusted me more, and the days no longer felt uncertain. Work began to feel normal again. And something interesting was happening inside my mind. The fear that once followed every decision had started to fade. Psychologists often describe this process as confidence recovery through repeated success. When the brain experiences small positive outcomes again and again, it begins rebuilding trust in your own abilities. At first, success may look small. Finishing a shift on time. Solving a problem at work. Holding a comfortable conversation in English. But these small moments slowly change the brain's expectations about the future. Instead of expecting failure, the mind begins expecting progress. My English practice continued every day. By now, the notebook was almost full. Page after page of short sentences that described my journey. One afternoon at the library, I opened a fresh page and wrote, "I am moving forward. I am moving forward." Then I repeated the sentence again. I am moving forward. Emily noticed the change too. Our conversations had become more relaxed and natural. Sometimes we spoke about books or movies. Sometimes we talked about culture and travel. Sometimes we simply joked about small things. Language learning had slowly turned into friendship. And friendship had quietly turned into something deeper. One evening we sat at our usual cafe table while rain tapped gently against the windows. Emily watched me speak with the barista while ordering coffee. After I returned to the table, she smiled. "Your English sounds very natural now." I laughed. "It still feels slow in my head." "That's normal," she replied. Language experts often explain that learners feel slower internally because the brain is still translating and organizing ideas. But to listeners, the speech already sounds smooth. Progress often becomes visible to others before we recognize it ourselves. That evening we talked about the future again. Emily asked a question she had asked once before, months earlier. "Have you thought about starting another business someday?" This time the question felt different. It no longer sounded frightening. Instead, it sounded possible. "I've been thinking about it," I admitted. Her eyes brightened. "What kind of business?" I explained an idea that had been forming slowly in my mind. During my delivery job, I noticed that many small companies struggled with local logistics. Packages were often delayed. Communication between drivers and businesses was sometimes messy. I began imagining a small service that could help businesses manage local deliveries more efficiently. It was not a huge idea, but it was realistic. Psychologists studying entrepreneurship often say that experience transforms failure into insight. When someone loses a business, they gain valuable knowledge about what works and what does not. Failure becomes education. And education improves the next attempt. Emily listened carefully. "That sounds promising," she said. "But remember something." "What?" I asked. "You don't need to rush." That advice was important. In the past, I had believed success required fast action. Move quickly. Expand quickly. Solve problems quickly. But life had taught me something different. Real growth is patient. So for now, the plan was simple. Save money. Learn more about logistics. Improve my English communication skills. Prepare carefully. Preparation builds confidence. Confidence reduces risk. And risk, when managed wisely, becomes opportunity. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened at work. My manager called me into the small office near the warehouse entrance. "I've been watching your work," he said. My first thought was that I had done something wrong. But he continued. You're reliable. Then he offered me a slightly different role, helping coordinate delivery schedules along with my driving duties. It was a small promotion. But it mattered. Because coordination required communication. Phone calls. Messages. Clear instructions. And suddenly my English practice had real professional value. That evening I told Emily the news at the cafe. She raised her coffee cup like a small celebration. "See," she said. "You're rising." I smiled. The phrase felt accurate. Not a dramatic rise. Not a sudden transformation. Just steady movement upward. That night, when I returned home, I opened my notebook once more. I wrote a sentence that felt meaningful. Slow progress is still progress. Slow progress is still progress. Then I read it again. Because sometimes people expect life to change overnight. But the truth is simpler. Great changes are often built from hundreds of quiet steps. And those quiet steps were slowly leading me towards something I had not expected when my business first collapsed. A new career path. A stronger voice in English. And a relationship that was about to become the most important part of my story. The life we built together. Life sometimes changes so gradually that you only understand it when you stop and look back. One day you realize that the person who once felt lost is no longer standing in the same place. The fear that once controlled every decision has become quieter. The future that once looked uncertain now has shape and direction. That realization arrived for me one evening while sitting in the same small cafe where Emily and I had shared so many conversations. Rain tapped softly against the windows, just like it had months earlier. The barista recognized us now. Our table near the corner window had almost become a tradition. But something about that evening felt different. Not dramatic. Just meaningful. Emily was telling a story about a family event she had attended the previous weekend. Her hands moved gently as she spoke, and her voice carried the familiar calm warmth that had always made conversations easy. While listening, a quiet thought appeared in my mind. Life had changed. Completely. A year earlier I had been sitting alone in my apartment, staring at an email from the bank that told me my business had collapsed. My mind was filled with uncertainty, fear, and embarrassment. Now I was sitting across from someone who had become an important part of my life. Someone who had listened to my slow English sentences without judgment. Someone who had encouraged every small step forward. Someone who had quietly become more than a friend. Psychologists often explain that human connection is one of the strongest forces in personal recovery. Supportive relationships reduce stress, increase motivation, and help people rebuild confidence after difficult experiences. Looking back, I could see that clearly. Emily had not solved my financial problems. She had not rebuilt my business. But she had helped rebuild something even more important. Belief. After a moment of silence, Emily looked at me curiously. "You're thinking about something," she said. I smiled. "Just remembering." "Remembering what?" she asked. "The first day we talked in the library." She laughed softly. "You were very serious that day." I was nervous, I admitted. "I was practicing the sentence today. I feel a little stronger." Emily nodded. "I remember." Then she added with a playful smile, you looked like you were preparing for an exam." Maybe she was right. Language learning sometimes feels like preparing for hundreds of tiny exams, each conversation testing your ability to understand, respond, and express ideas. But over time something interesting happens. The language stops feeling like a test. It becomes a bridge. A bridge between thoughts and people. That evening, after finishing our coffee, we decided to take a walk through the nearby park. The night air was cool, and the streetlights reflected gently on the wet pavement. As we walked, Emily suddenly asked a question that surprised me. "Do you remember the sentence you practiced the most when we first met?" I thought for a moment. Then I smiled. "Yes." "What was it?" she asked. "Life sometimes starts again." She laughed softly. That sentence aged well. It really had. Because over the past year, life had not only started again, it had grown into something richer than I had imagined. My work had improved. The scheduling role at the delivery company gave me more responsibility and better pay. I had begun saving money again and slowly researching the logistics idea that once lived only in my imagination. My English had improved too. Not perfect, but comfortable. Conversations no longer felt like obstacles. They felt like opportunities. But the most meaningful change stood beside me on that quiet park path. Emily. Relationships develop slowly when they are built on trust. There had been no dramatic moment where we suddenly announced our feelings. Instead, the connection grew through conversations, shared challenges, and mutual respect. One evening months later, while sitting on a bench in that same park, we finally spoke honestly about it. Emily looked at me thoughtfully. "You know something," she said. "What?" I asked. "We've built something strong." Her words felt simple but powerful. Yes. We had built something. Not just a relationship. A life. And eventually that life grew even more. Marriage came naturally, without grand drama. Our families celebrated together, and the ceremony felt joyful but calm, much like the way our story had unfolded. Years later, children filled our home with noise, laughter, and endless curiosity. They asked questions about everything, including my accent when I spoke English. Sometimes they laughed when I pronounced certain words differently. And I laughed with them. Because language had become part of our family story. Every now and then, I still open my old English notebook. The pages are worn now, but the sentences remain clear. My business is in trouble. I feel scared today. I will keep trying. I am moving forward. Each sentence marks a moment when life could have moved in a different direction. But instead, step by step, sentence by sentence, the story continued. And that story was about to reach its most important realization. Because the day I once believed was the worst day of my life, would eventually reveal its true meaning. The day that changed everything. There is a strange truth about life that many people only understand years later. The moments that feel like the end are sometimes the quiet beginnings of something far better. For a long time, I believed the worst day of my life was the day my business collapsed. I can still remember the feeling with perfect clarity. The email from the bank. The empty office. The silence that followed months of effort and hope. At that moment, it felt like everything had disappeared. Years of work had vanished, and the future looked like a blank wall with no doors. Fear was everywhere. Fear of failure. Fear of starting again. Fear of disappointing the people who believed in me. But now, sitting in my living room years later while my children laughed in the next room, I realized something surprising. That day had not destroyed my life. It had redirected it. Without that collapse, I would never have walked into the library that morning. Without that library visit, I would never have practiced those simple English sentences. Without those awkward first conversations, I would never have met Emily. And without Emily, my life would be completely different. Psychologists sometimes talk about something called post-traumatic growth. It describes the positive changes people experience after difficult or painful life events. Instead of breaking a person permanently, adversity can sometimes create deeper strength, stronger relationships, and clearer purpose. Looking back, I could see that clearly in my own story. Failure forced me to slow down. It forced me to rebuild my confidence step by step. It forced me to learn again. Language became part of that rebuilding process. Learning English had never been just about grammar or vocabulary. It had been about proving to myself that progress was still possible. Every new word was a small victory. Every conversation was a step forward. And every mistake reminded me that learning and living follow the same rule. Progress comes from trying again. One evening, while helping my daughter with her homework, she asked a question that made me pause. "Dad, were you always good at English?" I laughed. "Not even close." She looked surprised. "But you speak it all the time." "That's because I practiced for a long time," I explained. Then I showed her something. The old notebook. The one filled with simple sentences. She flipped through the pages slowly. "These are so short," she said. "Yes," I replied. "That's how learning starts." She read one sentence out loud. "Today I feel a little stronger." Then she looked up at me. "Did you really write this?" "Yes." "Why?" I thought about it for a moment before answering. Because sometimes the only way to move forward is to remind yourself that you're getting stronger, even when progress feels small. Children often understand wisdom faster than adults expect. She nodded thoughtfully. "I like that sentence," she said. Then she added something that made me smile. "I'm going to write it in my notebook too." In that moment, I realized that the lessons I had learned during my hardest time were now becoming part of someone else's journey. Failure had turned into experience. Experience had turned into wisdom. And wisdom had become something I could share. Later that night, after the house became quiet, I sat alone for a few minutes thinking about the path life had taken. The broken business. The long nights of uncertainty. The quiet library. The first nervous English conversation. The cafe near the corner window. The park walks. The life Emily and I built together. Each moment connected to the next like pieces of a story that only made sense when viewed from the end. And the biggest lesson became clear. The worst day of your life may not actually be the worst. It might be the day that pushes you toward the life you were meant to build. Many people watching this video may feel stuck right now. Maybe you feel like your effort is not working. Maybe your plans have collapsed. Maybe you are thinking about giving up. But life has a way of surprising those who continue moving forward. The path may change. The destination may look different. But growth is still possible. The simple truth is this. A new life often begins the moment we decide not to stop trying. That was the real meaning behind the sentence I practiced so many years ago. Life sometimes starts again. Because starting again does not mean failure. It means courage. It means choosing progress over fear. And sometimes, it means discovering a future that is even better than the one you originally planned. So if today feels like the hardest chapter of your story, remember something important. This chapter might only be the beginning. And the life waiting on the other side may be greater than anything you imagined. Sometimes the moment you believe everything is over, is actually the quiet beginning of the life you were meant to live. The day I lost my business felt like the end of my story. I thought failure had closed every door in front of me. But looking back now, I see something completely different. That moment didn't destroy my future, it redirected it toward a path I never would have discovered otherwise. A small decision to keep learning. A simple notebook filled with imperfect English sentences. One unexpected conversation in a quiet library. Those small steps slowly built a new life. A stronger mind. A deeper purpose. A family I never imagined would exist. Life rarely changes through one dramatic moment. Most of the time, it changes through tiny choices we make when things feel hardest. The choice to keep going. The choice to keep learning. The choice to believe that your story is not finished yet. If this story connected with you today, remember this. The chapter you are living right now might feel like the hardest one, but it might also be the chapter that leads to everything better waiting ahead. And sometimes, the greatest stories begin exactly where people thought they would end. If you enjoy meaningful stories about life lessons, personal growth, motivation, learning English through storytelling, and powerful real-life transformations, this channel was created for you. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story that might change the way you see your own life. Because the next story we share might feel even closer to your heart, and it might reveal a lesson that arrives at exactly the right moment. Subscribe now and join a growing community that believes every ending can become a new beginning. And before you leave, tell me something in the comments. Which moment in this story felt the most real to you? Your answer might inspire someone else who is still trying to stand up again. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the life you're meant to live is waiting just one decision beyond the moment you almost gave up.